I need to tell someone what happened in Harrow Creek. Not because I think anyone will believe me. Not because I think telling this story will fix what I did. I need to tell someone because the alternative is sitting alone in this apartment, listening to the sound and pretending it isn't getting closer every night. 3 people are gone because of me. I want to say dead, but that's the thing, I don't actually know if they're dead. I don't know what happened to them. Nobody does. And somehow, that's worse, because dead is an answer. Dead is a period at the end of a sentence. What happened in Harrow Creek doesn't have periods, it just keeps going. I can still hear it. Right now, as I'm recording this, a low hum, just beneath the threshold of what you'd normally notice. Like tinnitus, but with rhythm, with intention. I've had my hearing tested twice. The audiologist said there's nothing wrong with me. But I hear it every night, starting around 9 o'clock. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from where it makes sense. Let me start from before I knew any better. My name is Marcus Elliott. I'm 34 years old. For the last 6 years, I've been running a podcast and a modest blog about American folklore, small-town legends, regional ghost stories, the oral histories that never make it into textbooks. I called the show Back Road Americana. I had about 11,000 subscribers, which was enough to justify the gas money and the cheap motels, but not much else. I wasn't trying to prove anything supernatural. I want to be very clear about that. I was a skeptic, a rationalist. I studied anthropology at WVU, and I approached folklore the way my professors taught me, as cultural artifact, as collective memory, as metaphor. When a town in eastern Kentucky told me about a woman in white who walked the creek bed at midnight, I didn't bring an EMF meter. I brought a recorder and asked who she might have been and what she meant to them and why they still told her story 100 years later. That's what I thought I was going to Harrow Creek for. Another story, another episode. I first heard about the town from an email. This was last October, maybe early November. A listener named Dale Vickers wrote me a long, rambling message about a place called Harrow Creek in the southwestern corner of West Virginia, near the Kentucky border. Deep in the hills. The kind of place that doesn't show up on Google Maps with a street view, you just get the blue dot on a gray line and nothing else. Dale said the town had legends, plural. Not one ghost story, not one local monster, but a whole ecosystem of rules and rituals that the residents followed without question. He said his grandmother had grown up there and that she refused to talk about it, even decades after leaving. The only thing she'd ever told him was this: every small town has its own terrifying legends. Harrow Creek's legends are the only reason it still exists. That got my attention. Not the legends themselves, plenty of towns have those. It was the framing. Legends as infrastructure, stories not just told for entertainment but maintained, enforced, lived inside of. That was different. That was anthropologically interesting. I emailed Dale back and asked for more details. He gave me directions, a few names of people who might talk to me, and a warning that I didn't take seriously enough. He said, "They won't want you there. Don't take it personally. They're not being rude. They're being careful." I should have asked him what they were being careful about. I drove into Harrow Creek on a Tuesday afternoon in mid-November. The drive from Charleston took about 4 hours, too, on the interstate, due on increasingly narrow state routes that wound through hollows so deep the GPS lost signal entirely. The last 30 minutes were on an unmarked gravel road that my rental car was absolutely not designed for. The town appeared gradually. Not all at once, the way most places do when you come around a bend and see a water tower or a gas station sign. Harrow Creek leaked into view. First a fence post, then a mailbox, rusted and leaning, with no name on it. Then a house, set way back from the road. Curtains drawn. A wisp of chimney smoke. Then another. Then a few more, clustered tighter. And then I was on what passed for a main street, a single paved road maybe a quarter-mile long, with a post office, a general store, a church with white clapboard siding and a bell tower, and a building with a hand-painted sign that read, Arden's Boarding House. The population sign at the edge of town said 347, but the number had been painted over more than once. I could see the ghosts of older numbers underneath: 412, 389, 361, always going down, never up. I parked outside the general store and got out. The air was cold, not just November cold. There was a dampness to it, a mineral quality, like the inside of a cave. The town sat in a narrow valley between two ridges covered in dense hardwood forest. The trees were mostly bare, their branches like cracks in the gray sky. The woods pressed in close on every side. It felt less like a town in a valley and more like a clearing in a forest. Like the forest was the default state of things, and the town was the exception, and the forest knew it. I remember standing there in the parking lot of the general store, stretching after the long drive, and having a very simple, very clear thought. This place does not want people. Not in a dangerous way. Not yet. More like the way a library doesn't want noise. The town was quiet. Not peaceful quiet. The kind of quiet that feels maintained, curated. There were no dogs barking, no kids playing, no radios coming from open windows. Just the wind in the bare branches and the distant sound of water, a creek, presumably the one the town was named after, running somewhere behind the buildings. A woman came out of the general store. She was maybe 60, heavy-set with gray hair pulled back and a fleece vest over a flannel shirt. She looked at me the way you'd look at a stain on your ceiling, with mild concern and the suspicion that it was going to get worse. "Help you?" she said. I told her who I was. I told her about the podcast. I told her I was interested in local folklore and that I'd been pointed toward Harrow Creek by a listener whose family had roots here. I gave her my most disarming smile, the one that had gotten me through dozens of suspicious small-town introductions. She didn't smile back. "We don't really have stories like that," she said. "Quiet town. Not much to tell." I told her I'd heard otherwise. I mentioned Dale's name. She stiffened slightly, just a flicker, but I caught it. "Don't know any Dale," she said. "You looking for a room?" I said I was. She pointed down the street to the boarding house. Said a woman named June Arden ran it. Said I could probably get a room for $30 a night if I wasn't particular about the mattress. Then she went back inside. That interaction set the template for almost every conversation I'd have in Harrow Creek. Polite but guarded. Helpful enough to not be rude, but with a clear boundary drawn around certain topics. Nobody was hostile. Nobody told me to leave. But there was a consistent, practiced deflection whenever I steered toward anything that resembled a legend, a story, a rule, or a tradition. It was like interviewing a town that had rehearsed. June Arden was different. Not open exactly, but less sealed. She was in her 70s, thin and straight-backed, with wire-rimmed glasses and hands that never stopped moving. Folding towels, wiping counters, adjusting things that didn't need adjusting. Her boarding house was clean and plain. Wooden floors, quilts on the beds, a shared bathroom at the end of the hall, and a kitchen where she served breakfast at 7 and dinner at 6. No exceptions. When I told her why I was there, she didn't deflect the way the woman at the store had. She just looked at me for a long moment, and then she said something that I wrote down in my notebook, because it struck me as odd. "You can ask your questions," she said. "Just be mindful of what answers you go chasing." I asked her what she meant by that. She didn't elaborate. She showed me to my room, second floor, end of the hall, facing the back of the building and the tree line beyond. The window looked out over about 50 yards of brown grass and then the forest, dense and dark even in the afternoon. There was a small wooden cross nailed to the window frame on the outside. Not decorative, functional, like a lock. I unpacked, set up my recording equipment, and went back downstairs to start working. I had a list of names Dale had given me, people who he thought might be willing to talk. The first 3 I tried weren't home, or pretended not to be. The 4th was a man named Gene Stoddard. who ran what passed for the town's mechanic shop, a corrugated metal garage at the south end of the main road. Gene was in his 50s, lean, with oil-blackened hands and a chew bulging in his lower lip. He was willing to talk, but only about certain things. The town's history as a logging settlement, the coal company that had operated a mine in the next hollow over until it collapsed in 1971, killing 14 men, the flood of '85 that took out the original bridge. He told these stories easily, almost proudly. This was the sanctioned history, the story the town told about itself. But when I asked about legends, about the stories behind the stories, the ones people told at night, the ones kids grew up hearing, he went still. Not uncomfortable, not angry, just careful. "Every town's got its ghost stories," he said. "Nothing special about ours." I pressed a little. I mentioned that Dale had described specific rules, specific behaviors, things the townspeople did that didn't have obvious explanations. Gene spat tobacco juice into a styrofoam cup and looked past me, toward the tree line. "Rules are just common sense, dressed up," he said. "We're in the middle of nowhere. Woods are thick. Animals come out at night. You learn to be careful. That's all it is." I asked him about the church bells. I'd noticed the evening I arrived that the church bell rang at exactly 9 o'clock. Not on the hour, the way clocks chime. A sustained, deliberate tolling 7 times, slow and even. It felt ceremonial, purposeful. Gene looked at me for what felt like a very long time. "That's just the evening bell," he said. "Tradition. Goes back to the founders, means the day's done. Go home, lock up." "Lock up against what?" He didn't answer that. He changed the subject to the weather, and I knew I'd hit the boundary. Over the next 3 days, I conducted 14 interviews. I recorded all of them with permission. I walked the town end to end, took photographs, mapped the layout, visited the small cemetery behind the church. I did my job, and slowly, without anyone explicitly telling me anything, I started to notice the patterns. The crosses. They were everywhere, not just on the church and not just on door frames, which is common enough in religious communities. They were nailed to fence posts, carved into the bark of trees at the edge of the woods, scratched into the concrete of the bridge that crossed the creek, painted in faded white on the foundations of buildings. Hundreds of them. Small, crude, consistent. The 9 o'clock bell. Every night without exception. 7 tolls. And within 10 minutes of the last toll, the town went dark. Porch lights off, curtains drawn. Not a soul outside. I stood on the boarding house porch that first night and watched it happen. The town shutting down with the precision of a military operation. By 9:15, I could have been the last person alive. The trees. I kept catching people looking at the tree line, not staring, nothing dramatic, just checking, the way you'd check a rearview mirror. A quick glance, almost unconscious, and then back to whatever they were doing. Everyone did it, even the children, especially the children, and the names, or rather, the absence of names. I noticed that people in Harrow Creek didn't use names casually when they were outdoors. Inside a house or a building, they spoke normally. But outside, conversations shifted. People said hey instead of using a name. They'd gesture or nod instead of calling out. At first I thought it was just small town familiarity. Everyone knows everyone, no need for names, but it was more specific than that. It was a practice, a discipline. I asked June about it on my 3rd evening. We were in the kitchen. She was washing dishes, I was drying. The 9 o'clock bell had rung 20 minutes earlier, and the house had that sealed, settled feeling like a ship battened down for a storm. "People here are just private," she said. "Always have been." "It's not privacy," I said. "It's specific. People avoid using names outdoors, especially after dark. Why?" She set down the plate she was washing. She dried her hands slowly and deliberately on her apron. Then she sat down at the kitchen table, and looked at me the way a doctor looks at you before delivering bad news. "Mr. Elliot," she said, "you seem like a decent man. You're polite, you're respectful, you're doing your job, and I don't begrudge you that. But I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to actually hear it." I sat down across from her. "There are things in this town that work because people follow them," she said. "Not because they understand them, not because they can explain them, because they follow them. You're looking for a story, a neat little narrative you can put in your podcast and wrap up with a bow. But what we have here isn't a story. It's a system, and systems don't work when you take them apart to see how they run." "What kind of system?" She shook her head. "I've said more than I should. Just while you're here, follow the rules everyone else follows. Be inside by 9. Don't use names after dark. Stay out of the woods. And if you hear someone call your name from outside this house after the bell rings, you do not answer. You do not go to the window. You lie in your bed and you wait for morning. Can you do that?" I said yes, and I meant it at the time, but I was also recording the conversation on my phone, which was sitting on the table between us, and the part of my brain that was always working, always chasing the next episode, was already composing the opening narration. I didn't understand yet. I thought I was collecting a story. I didn't realize I was entering one. On the 4th night, I heard my name. I was in bed. It was after midnight. I'd been reviewing my recordings on my laptop, making notes, organizing material. The room was dark except for the screen light. I'd closed the laptop and was lying there in that drifting pre-sleep state when you're not quite awake but not quite gone. "Marcus." It came from outside, from the direction of the tree line. I sat up. The room was cold. The boarding house's heating was uneven at best, and my breath made small clouds in the moonlight coming through the window. "Marcus." The same voice. No, not the same. Similar, like a recording played back on slightly wrong equipment. The pitch was right, the cadence was right, but there was something underneath it, a resonance, like the word was being spoken inside a very large, very empty space. My first thought was that someone was outside, calling for me. Maybe a townsperson who decided to talk. Maybe someone who wanted to tell me something they couldn't say in daylight. That made sense. That was rational. I got up and moved toward the window. I was halfway across the room when June's words hit me like a hand on my chest. "If you hear someone call your name from outside this house after the bell rings, you do not answer, you do not go to the window." I stopped. I stood there in the middle of the room, in my socks and sweatpants, and I listened. Silence. Just the wind, the distant sound of the creek. Then, "Marcus, come here." The voice was closer. Not by much, maybe 10, 15 feet closer than before. But closer, and the quality of it had shifted. It was less like a voice now and more like a shape made of sound. Like something was forming the word without vocal cords, without breath, without a mouth, assembling it from pieces. I did not go to the window. I went back to bed. I pulled the quilt up to my chin, and I lay there with my eyes open, staring at the ceiling, listening. The voice called my name 4 more times over the next hour. Each time slightly different. Each time slightly closer. And then it stopped. And the silence that followed was somehow worse, thick and heavy and expectant, like the pause between a question and an answer. I didn't sleep that night. Not at all. When the sky lightened around 6:30 and the first sounds of the town waking up started, a door closing, a truck engine, the clatter of June making breakfast downstairs, I felt a relief so physical it was almost painful. Like being pulled out of deep water. At breakfast, I told June what I'd heard. She didn't look surprised. She didn't look scared. She looked resigned. "You didn't answer," she said. Not a question. "No." "You didn't go to the window." "No." She nodded. "Good. Don't." She poured me more coffee. It learns your name fast, faster with some people than others. You being an outsider, asking questions, drawing attention to yourself that speeds things up. It's interested in you now. What is? She looked at me over her glasses. Mr. Elliot, if I had a word for it, I would have used it a long time ago. After that conversation, something shifted. Not in the town in me. I was still a skeptic. I still believed on an intellectual level that there was a rational explanation for what I'd heard. Sound carries strangely in valleys. Wind through hollow trees can produce eerily human-like tones. My own expectation, primed by days of legend hunting, could have shaped ambiguous noise into the pattern of my name. But the body doesn't negotiate with the intellect. My body had heard something call my name in the dark, and my body remembered it. I felt it as a tension in my shoulders, a tightness in my jaw, an increased startle response that made me flinch at every unexpected sound. I was afraid. And the fear wasn't intellectual, it was animal. I decided to change my approach. Instead of asking people about legends in the abstract, I started asking about the rules specifically. Not what they believed, what they did. The practices, the behaviors, the daily rituals that everyone in town followed without discussion. I found an unlikely source. A teenage girl named Cora Whitfield. 16 years old, sharp, restless, and openly contemptuous of what she called the town's superstition. I met her at the general store, where she was stocking shelves as an after-school job. She reminded me of every smart kid in every small town who can already see the exit sign and is counting the days. Cora was willing to talk because she wanted to prove to herself and to me that it was all nonsense, that the rules were just inherited paranoia from generations of isolated, uneducated mountain people. She laid them out for me with the practiced disdain of someone who'd been chafing against them her entire life. Rule 1, she said, leaning against the counter. Be inside before the 9 o'clock bell. No exceptions, even in summer when it's still light out. The bell rings. You go inside. Rule 2. Don't say anyone's name out loud after the bell, not even inside if the windows are open. Especially don't say the name of anyone who's died. Rule 3. Don't go into the woods after dark. Not the edge of the woods, not the path to the creek. Nothing. If you need firewood, you cut it during the day and stack it inside before the bell. Rule 4. If you hear someone calling you from outside after dark, a voice, a knock, someone saying your name, you don't answer. You don't look. You don't acknowledge it in any way. Rule 5. If you find something in the woods that doesn't belong there, an object, a structure, anything that looks placed rather than natural, you don't touch it. You mark the spot and you tell Elder Pruitt. Rule 6. The creek is fine during the day. Don't go near the creek after sunset. Rule 7. She paused here, rolled her eyes. If the bell rings 8 times instead of 7, nobody leaves their house until the next morning, no matter what they hear. I asked her if the bell had ever rung 8 times. The eye-rolling stopped. She looked down at the counter and picked at a seam in the laminate. Once, she said, when I was 9. I don't really remember it. I asked her what happened. Nothing, she said, too quickly. My mom made us stay in the basement. We could hear, I don't know, sounds outside, like a lot of people walking around. But there's only 300 people in town and it sounded like way more than that. I was a kid. I probably imagined it. Her hand was shaking. She put it under the counter where I couldn't see it. I asked her who Elder Pruitt was. She said he was the town's unofficial authority on the rules, not the mayor, not the pastor, but the person everyone deferred to when it came to matters of... She searched for the word. Maintenance. He maintains the rules. He maintains everything, she said. The marks on the trees, the crosses, the salt lines, the look. It's all performance. It's all theater for people who are too scared to admit they live in a boring town in the middle of nowhere, and the only interesting thing about it is a bunch of made-up ghost stories. She said this loudly and defiantly, and a man 2 aisles over looked up from the canned goods he was examining and stared at her with an expression that I can only describe as parental fear. Not anger, fear for her. I found Elder Pruitt the next day. He lived on the far edge of town, in a house that was less a house and more a structure that had been added to over decades. The original cabin was visible at the core, surrounded by lean-tos and closed porches and extensions that gave the whole thing the appearance of a living thing that had grown rather than been built. His name was Thomas Pruitt. He was 81 years old, and he looked every day of it: sunken cheeks, spotted hands, a frame that had been large once but had been whittled down by time. But his eyes were sharp and dark and absolutely present, and when he looked at me, I had the distinct feeling of being evaluated by something far more acute than his appearance suggested. He knew who I was. He knew why I was there. He didn't bother with the deflections and denials that everyone else had given me. "You heard it last night," he said. Not a question. I told him I had. He nodded. "It's fast with strangers. They bring new sounds, new voices, new names. It gets excited." He said that word, excited, the way you'd say it about a predator catching a scent. "Sit down. I'll tell you what I can." We sat on his front porch. It was late afternoon, and the sun was already dropping behind the western ridge, throwing long shadows across the valley. The forest wall was maybe 30 yards from his porch. I could see the crosses carved into the nearest trees. Crude, deep, old. "This town was founded in 1847, he said. Logging camp at first. Then families came. The valley was good water, timber, game, shelter from the worst weather. The founders thought they'd found a perfect spot." He paused, spat off the porch. They were wrong. The spot was already occupied. I asked him what he meant. "I mean, something was here before the town. Something in the woods, in the ground, in the water maybe. I don't know what it is. My father didn't know. His father didn't know. We've had 170 years of not knowing, and we've gotten very good at it. But you know what it does. We know some of what it does. We know it listens. That's the oldest name for it, the listener. It hears. Everything said in this valley, it hears, especially names. Names are." He searched for the word. "Names are like keys. You say a name, and it's like opening a door. The listener can find that name, follow it, use it. Use it how? It calls. You've heard it. It takes a name and it makes a voice and it calls. And if you answer, if you speak back, if you open the door, if you go to it, it takes you. You walk into the woods and you don't come back. Where do you go?" He looked at me. "I told you. We've had 170 years of not knowing." I asked about the people who had disappeared. He said there had been many over the years, mostly in the early decades before the rules were established. The founders learned by loss. Every rule was written in someone's disappearance. The 9 o'clock bell that was after the Henderson family. 1863. Father, mother, 3 children. They were outside after dark, calling the children in for supper. The whole family gone. The bell was the solution. A signal. Everyone inside. Everyone quiet. The rule about names that came later. 1880s. People noticed that the listener was drawn to names. That saying a name after dark was like lighting a beacon. So they stopped. The Creek Rule. 1902. A boy named Samuel Fitch went to the creek at dusk to fill a water bucket. They found the bucket the next morning. Just the bucket. Every rule had a story like that behind it. Every prohibition was a scar. The town had been shaped by its losses the way a river is shaped by the rocks it flows around. The rules weren't superstition. They were survival data collected over generations and paid for in blood. I asked him about Rule 7. The 8 tolls. He went quiet for a long time. The shadows were getting longer. The tree line was growing indistinct in the fading light. Sometimes it gets out of the woods, he said. Not often. Maybe once a decade, maybe less. When it does, the bell rings 8 times and everybody stays sealed in until morning. Because when it's out of the woods, it's not just calling. It's walking. It's looking. It goes door to door, and it tries every name it knows. What does that sound like? Like your mother, like your dead wife, like your child, like everyone you've ever loved, standing on your porch, begging you to open the door. The sun was touching the ridgeline. The temperature was dropping fast. You should go back to June's place, he said. Bell rings in 40 minutes. You don't want to be out here. I asked him one more question before I left. I asked him why the town didn't just leave. Why stay? Why live inside this cage of rules when you could just go somewhere else? He looked at me with something that wasn't quite pity and wasn't quite contempt. Something in between. Some of us have left, he said. Some of us try. But here's the thing about the listener, Mr. Elliot. It knows every name that's ever been spoken in this valley. Every name. Going back to 1847. And once it knows your name, distance doesn't matter as much as you'd hope. He stood up and went inside. I heard the locks engage. Not one, but 3, 4, 5 locks, one after another. I walked back to the boarding house. Fast. The bell rang when I was 2 blocks away. I counted the tolls. 7. I had never been so grateful for a number in my life. That night, I made a mistake. Not the big one that came later. A small mistake. A human mistake. The kind you make when you're an investigator and your training runs ahead of your judgment. I set up a microphone by the window. Not to answer. Not to interact. Just to record. I was a documentarian. I needed evidence. I needed audio that I could analyze, that I could play back in daylight and examine rationally. I told myself it was science, it was methodology, it was responsible journalism. The recording from that night is 47 minutes long. I've listened to it more times than I should have. I've had 3 different audio engineers analyze it. None of them can explain what's on it. The first 20 minutes are ambient noise wind, the creak of the house settling, a distant owl. Normal nighttime audio for a rural location. At minute 21, the sound begins. Not a voice. Not yet. A hum. Low, rhythmic, just barely within the range of the microphone. One of the audio engineers described it as subharmonic vocalization, a sound produced at a frequency that suggests a vocal apparatus, but not a human one, something much larger, something with a resonating chamber the size of a room. At minute 26, the voice starts. My name. Marcus. But it's layered this time. There are at least 3 distinct vocal textures, saying the name simultaneously, one that sounds almost human, one that sounds like it's coming through water, and one that's just a vibration, a pressure, a shaping of the air that your brain interprets as language, even though it technically isn't. At minute 31, the voice changes. It stops saying my name and starts saying other things. Fragments, phrases. I recognized some of them. They were things I had said during my interviews, sentences I had spoken aloud during the day, in the town, in the open air. It was playing them back, reassembled, cut up, stitched together in new orders. My own words in my own voice, but arranged into something I never said. Come here, Marcus. I found it. Come to the trees. I found what you're looking for. My voice, my cadence, my specific speech patterns, but I never said those words. At minute 38, the recording picks up something else. Footsteps. Not on the ground outside, on the roof, directly above my room. Slow, deliberate steps. Too heavy for an animal. Too measured for a person. And with each step, a sound like wood cracking, not the wood of the roof, but something organic. Something like joints popping, like a body unfolding. At minute 42, the recording goes to static. Not white noises, structured static, patterned. When one of the audio engineers ran it through a spectrograph, the visual pattern it produced looked like a waveform of human speech, compressed and accelerated to a speed no human could process. He estimated it contained roughly 3 hours of speech compressed into 5 minutes of static. He asked me what it was. I said I didn't know. He said it looked like someone had recorded every conversation in a small town over the course of a day, and then played them all back simultaneously at 10 times speed. I didn't tell him that's probably exactly what it was. At minute 47, the recording ends. Not because I stopped it. The file just ends. The recording software logged no errors, no crashes, no interruptions. The file simply has a hard stop at 47 minutes, as though the tape had been cut with scissors. I didn't tell June about the recording. I didn't tell anyone. I saved the files to 3 different locations, and I went about my next day as though nothing had happened. But something had happened. Something was happening. And the analytical part of my brain, the part that had driven my whole career, was no longer in the driver's seat. Something older had taken the wheel. Something that understood, in a way my rational mind refused to, that I was not studying a phenomenon. I was inside one. On my 6th day in Harrow Creek, someone went missing. His name was Boyd Langham, 43 years old, worked odd jobs around the town, lived alone in a house near the south end of the road. He was the town's closest thing to a problem case. Not dangerous, not criminal, but careless. He drank, he kept irregular hours. He was known to bend the rules when he thought nobody was watching. I learned all this after the fact. What I knew at the time was this. I woke up to shouting. It was early, maybe 6 in the morning, just after first light. I looked out my window and saw a group of people gathered near the tree line behind the boarding house. June was among them. So was Gene Stoddard and Elder Pruitt, and maybe a dozen others. I went downstairs and outside. June saw me and shook her head, a small, sharp gesture that meant stay back, but I could see what they were looking at. At the edge of the woods, right where the grass ended and the trees began, there was a trail. Not a path, a trail. Like something had been dragged. The grass was flattened in a line that led from the direction of Boyd's house, across the open ground and into the trees, where it disappeared into the underbrush. And there were footprints. Boyd's boot prints, I was told later. But they were wrong. They started normal, evenly spaced, walking, and then they changed. The spacing got wider, like he was running, and then they changed again. The prints got deeper at the toes, lighter at the heels, as though he was being pulled forward, being led, or being dragged by something he was still trying to walk toward. The trail ended at the tree line. Beyond that, nothing. The search party went into the woods. Elder Pruitt insisted on leading it himself. And they found nothing. No tracks, no clothing, no blood, no sign of Boyd Langham at all. It was as though the forest had opened its mouth and closed it. The search lasted 4 hours. When the party came back, they looked exhausted and haunted, and nobody spoke about what they had or hadn't found. The town drew in on itself. Doors closed, curtains were drawn, even though it was midday. I found Gene Stoddard sitting on the tailgate of his truck, smoking. His hands were dirty from the search. "This has happened before," I said. He looked at me for a long time. "This happens," he said. "Not often, but it happens. Someone breaks the rules, someone gets careless, and they're gone." Boyd went outside after the bell. Gene nodded slowly. He'd been drinking. He did that sometimes. Went out on his porch after dark, talked to himself, and out here talking to yourself is the same as talking to it. He spoke his own name. He spoke all kinds of names. People he knew. People who'd passed. His mother, who died 6 years ago. When you're drunk and alone and missing someone, you say their name. You can't help it. Gene's voice was flat and tired. That's what it counts on. I asked him what would happen now. He said there was a protocol. Elder Pruitt would check the boundary markers. The crosses would be recarved if needed. Salt would be laid at the tree line. The bell would ring as usual. And they would not speak Boyd's name again. Not ever. Not outdoors, not after dark. Maybe not at all for a while. His name it's in there now, in the collection. And anything that's in the collection can be used. I thought about my recording, about my own voice reassembled, saying things I'd never said, about the idea of a collection, a library of names and voices accumulated over decades, over a century, harvested from the air of this valley by something patient and vast and unseen. I should have left that day. I know that now. But I didn't leave, because I had committed the cardinal sin of the investigator. I had stopped investigating and started believing, but I hadn't stopped investigating. The belief and the investigation fed each other. The more I learned, the more I believed. The more I believed, the more I needed to learn. It was a feedback loop, and it was pulling me deeper. And there was something else. Something I'm ashamed to admit. A part of me, a small, cold, professional part, was thinking about the podcast, about the episode, about what this story could be. I had stumbled into something genuinely extraordinary, and the documentarian in me couldn't walk away from it. Not yet. Not without understanding more. That calculation cost 2 more people their lives. On the 7th night, I did something unforgivable. I went into the woods. Not after dark. I'm not suicidal. I went in the late afternoon, with maybe 2 hours of daylight left, carrying my field recorder, my phone, a flashlight, and a hand-drawn map that I'd cobbled together from conversations with Elder Pruitt and Cora and Jean. I told June I was going for a walk. She gave me a look that said she knew exactly what kind of walk I meant, and she told me to be back before the bell. I promised her I would. The woods were different from the town the way the ocean is different from the shore. The moment I crossed the tree line, the quality of the air changed. It was colder, damper. The light dropped by half, even though the canopy was mostly bare. The branches were so dense and interlocking that they formed a lattice overhead that filtered everything into a gray-green twilight. And it was quiet. I keep using that word, but I need you to understand what I mean by it. Quiet in the woods around Harrow Creek isn't the absence of sound. It's the presence of silence. An active, pressing, attentive silence. Like being in a room with someone who isn't speaking, but is very much listening. Every step I took, every twig that snapped, every leaf that crunched, felt like a disruption. Like I was making noise in a place that had been quiet for a very long time and didn't appreciate the interruption. I followed the creek, upstream. Elder Pruitt had mentioned that the oldest markers, the original boundary signs placed by the first settlers who established the rules, were about a mile into the woods along the creek bed. I wanted to see them. I wanted to document them. I told myself it was research. I found the first marker about half a mile in. It was a stone, a flat piece of limestone about 2 feet tall, driven into the ground like a headstone. On its face, someone had chiseled a symbol, not a cross. Something older, a circle with a vertical line through it, bisected by 2 horizontal lines. I'd seen variations of it in Appalachian folk magic traditions. A ward, a boundary sign, a mark that says, "Do not cross." There were more of them. Every 50 yards or so, another stone, another symbol. They formed a line, a perimeter, I realized, running roughly parallel to the tree line that faced the town. Whatever the listener was, this was the line the town had drawn. This far, and no further. Stay on your side. I was photographing the 6th stone when I noticed something wrong with the light. It had gotten darker. Not sunset dark, the quality was wrong. I checked my phone. It was 4:15 p.m. Sunset wasn't until 5:30. But the light filtering through the canopy had dimmed, as though something had moved between the sun and the trees. Something very large. I looked up. The sky through the branches was gray. Overcast, I told myself. A cloud had moved in. That's all. But the trees were wrong too. I'd been walking in a relatively straight line along the creek, and the forest around me had been consistent mature hardwoods, mostly oak and maple, spaced naturally with underbrush between them. Now looking around, the trees were different, closer together, older. Their trunks were thicker, their bark darker, and they were growing at slight angles, not toward the sun, the way trees normally grow, but toward each other. Leaning inward, converging, and the creek had stopped making sound. Water was still flowing. I could see it moving over the rocks, but it was silent. Completely, impossibly silent. As though someone had hit the mute button on that one specific element of the environment. I started walking back. Not running, walking quickly, deliberately, keeping my breathing even, counting my steps. I'm a rational person. There is a rational explanation. The light is a cloud. The trees look different because I'm in a different part of the forest. The creek is quiet because I walked for 10 minutes. I should have reached the tree line. The first marker had been half a mile in. I'd gone maybe another quarter mile beyond it. I'd been walking back for 10 minutes at a brisk pace. I should have been out of the woods by now. I wasn't. The forest looked the same. The converging trees, the silent creek, the dimming light. I checked my phone, no signal, which was expected, but the compass app was spinning. Not drifting, spinning. The needle was rotating in a slow, steady circle, as though the magnetic field itself was being stirred. I stopped walking. I stood still, and I listened. The silence pressed in. Not empty silence, full silence. The kind of silence that has weight and texture and temperature. Cold silence. Deep silence. The silence of something very large holding its breath. And then, from somewhere ahead of me, not behind me, ahead, in the direction I was walking, the direction of the town, I heard the 9 o'clock bell. I checked my phone. It was 4:47 p.m. The bell rang 7 times. Slow, deliberate, exactly the way it sounded from the town. But I was in the woods. I was deep in the woods, in the wrong direction, and the bell was coming from deeper still. It was mimicking the bell, the way it mimicked voices, the way it mimicked my own words played back from the air. It was taking the sound that meant safety, the sound that meant go home, and it was using it to pull me further in. I turned around. I picked a direction that felt like out, and I walked. Fast. Not running, because running in the woods is how you trip and break an ankle, but fast. I ignored the bell. I ignored the shifting light. I ignored the way the trees seemed to lean toward me as I passed, the way the branches reached down like fingers, the way the ground under my feet felt soft and yielding, as though the earth itself was opening. I walked for 20 minutes. 20 minutes of accelerating terror, of my rational mind screaming explanations that my body refused to accept. And then, suddenly, abruptly, like walking through a door, I was out. The trees ended. The grass began. The boarding house was 50 yards away, its windows lit warm yellow in the early dusk. I looked at my phone. It was 5:10 p.m. I had plenty of time before the real bell. I looked behind me. The tree line was dark and still, and exactly where it should have been. The trees were spaced normally. The light was consistent. Everything was fine. Everything was ordinary. Except for one thing. On the ground, right at the edge of the trees, right at the spot where I'd come out, there was a footprint. Not mine, mine were beside it. This print was barefoot, human-shaped, but too large. At least size 16, maybe bigger, and deep. Sunk into the earth 4 or 5 inches, as though whatever made it weighed far more than a person should. The toes were pointing toward the town. I went inside. I locked the door. I sat at the kitchen table, and I shook, just shook. Full body tremors, the kind you can't control, the kind that come from adrenaline overload and the sudden absence of the thing that triggered it. June made me tea. She didn't ask where I'd been. She could tell. "You went into the woods," she said. I nodded. "Did it try to turn you around?" I described what had happened, the dimming light, the silent creak, the compass spinning, the false bell. She listened without surprise, the way you'd listen to a weather report confirming what you already knew. "The space in there doesn't work right," she said. "Not after a certain point. It's like, the deeper you go, the more it can change things. Bend them. The woods near the town are mostly normal because of the markers, the crosses, Elder Pruitt's maintenance, but past the boundary it's the listener's space. And in the listener's space, directions lie, and sounds lie, and time lies. What would have happened if I'd followed the bell?" She looked into her tea. "You would have walked," she said. "You would have kept walking. The bell would have stayed just ahead of you, always just a little further. And you would have walked until the real bell rang, and by then you'd be too deep. And then the night would come, and the calling would start, and you'd hear your name from every direction at once, and you wouldn't know which way was out, and eventually you'd answer. Not because you wanted to, because you'd be exhausted and scared and alone in the dark, and the voice would sound like someone you love. And you'd answer, and then you'd be gone. Gone where? I don't know, Mr. Elliot. I don't think anyone knows. I don't think where is the right question. I think the right question is, into what? And I don't want to know the answer to that." We sat in silence for a while. The real 9 o'clock bell rang 7 tolls, beautiful and terrible and real. The town went dark, the locks engaged, and in the silence that followed, from the direction of the woods, I heard a sound I hadn't heard before. Not a voice, not the hum. Something else. A sound like breathing, but enormous. Like the forest itself was inhaling. Like something vast and diffuse was drawing breath through the trees, through the ground, through the stones. It lasted maybe 10 seconds, and then silence again. The heavy, watchful, patient silence. June looked at me across the table. "That's new," she said quietly. "It doesn't usually do that." "What does it mean?" "It means it's paying attention, more than usual." She paused. "It means something has changed." She didn't say what. She didn't have to. We both knew. The something that had changed was me. My presence, my questions, my recording equipment, my microphone at the window, my walk in the woods. I had been poking at the membrane between the town and the thing in the forest, and the membrane was thinner than anyone had realized. Or maybe it was exactly as thin as they'd always known, and that's why they'd tried so hard to keep people like me from poking at it. I need to talk about what happened next carefully, not because the details are unclear. I remember them with a precision that I wish I didn't. But because what happened next is the part that's my fault. The part I have to live with. The part that follows me into sleep and waits for me there. On my 8th day, I decided to stay. I know. But listen. I was in too deep. Not physically, psychologically. I had recordings, I had testimony, I had documentation of something that my rational mind still wanted to categorize and explain, even as my animal brain was screaming at me to run. I told myself I needed one more day, one more interview, one more piece of evidence. And I did something I shouldn't have done. I called my producer. Her name was Renata. She managed the business side of the podcast sponsors, distribution, scheduling. She was in Brooklyn. I called her from inside the boarding house in the middle of the day. And I told her what I'd found. Not everything. Not the recording, not the walk in the woods. Just the broad strokes, isolated town. Generational folklore, complex rule system, possible episode, or even a series. She was excited. She asked if she could come out. Bring a better recorder, maybe a camera operator. I said no. I said it was too remote, too difficult to get to. I said I had everything I needed, but Renata was Renata. She didn't listen. She never listened. That was what made her good at her job, and it's what got her killed. Or taken, or whatever word covers what happened to her. She drove out the next day. She didn't tell me she was coming. She just showed up, parked her rental car behind mine on the main road, walked into the general store, and asked for me by name. By name. Outdoors. In the middle of the afternoon, in a town where names were currency and attention was danger. I found out she was there when June told me, and the look on June's face was one I'd never seen before. Not anger, not fear. Something beyond both. A weariness, so deep, it was almost grief. "There's a woman in town asking for you," she said. "By name. She said your full name on the street." My blood went cold. "She's at the store," June continued. "Go get her. Bring her inside. And tell her the rules, all of them, right now." I found Renata at the general store, charming the woman behind the counter, or trying to. She was smiling, talking about the podcast, complimenting the town, doing all the things that work in normal places and that were catastrophically wrong here. When she saw me, she waved and called out, "Marcus, there you are." My name, said loudly, outdoors, in the open air of the valley. I grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the boarding house without explaining. She was confused, then annoyed, then when she saw my face, scared. I sat her down in the kitchen, and I told her everything. Not the edited version, everything. The rules, the listener, the recording, the walk in the woods, Boyd's disappearance, Elder Pruitt's history lesson. Everything. She didn't believe me. Of course she didn't. I wouldn't have believed me. She thought the town had gotten to me, that I'd been isolated too long, that I'd absorbed the local paranoia through osmosis. She was kind about it, but firm. "Marcus, this is folklore. This is exactly what you study. You know how these things work. A closed community, generational trauma, shared mythology that reinforces social cohesion. It's textbook. I have a recording," I said, "of it saying my name, of it using my voice." "Pareidolia," she said. "Audio artifacts. You were primed to hear patterns. Boyd Langham is missing. People go missing in rural areas, especially people who drink. That's not supernatural, that's statistics." I wanted her to be right. A part of me, the part that still lived in the rational world, the part that had a degree and a methodology and a career built on skeptical inquiry, wanted desperately for her to be right. But she hadn't heard it. She hadn't felt the silence in those woods, the weight of it, the sentience of it. She hadn't seen the footprint at the tree line. She wanted to stay one night, record some interviews, get some ambient audio, leave in the morning. I said no. She said she'd already checked into the boarding house. June had given her a room. She was staying. I went to June. I begged her to tell Renata. June looked at me with those wire-rimmed glasses and that straight-backed posture, and she said, "I can't make a person believe something they've decided not to believe. I can only tell them the rules. She'll follow them or she won't." That night, I told Renata the rules. All 7. I made her repeat them back to me. She did it with the patient condescension of a person humoring a friend's breakdown, but she did it. She agreed to stay inside after the bell. She agreed to keep quiet. The bell rang at 9. 7 tolls. The town went dark. Renata and I sat in the kitchen with June, talking in low voices. It was almost comfortable, almost normal. Just 3 people in a warm kitchen on a cold night, talking quietly while the wind moved through the valley outside. At 11:15, Renata went to bed. Her room was next to mine on the 2nd floor. I heard her door close, heard the bed springs creak, heard silence. At 12:40, I heard her window open. I was awake. I'd been awake every night since the first one, lying in bed, listening. The sound of a window sliding open in the room next to mine was unmistakable. I got up. I went to her door. I knocked quietly. "Renata." No answer. "Renata, close the window." No answer. I tried the door. It was unlocked. I opened it. She was standing at the window. It was wide open. The cold night air was pouring in, and with it, that silence, that heavy, pressing, attentive silence that I knew so well. The curtains were billowing inward. The small wooden cross that had been nailed to the window frame was on the floor. She'd pried it off. She was leaning forward, her hands on the sill, her face tilted toward the darkness outside, listening. Renata. She didn't move. I stepped closer. I could see her face in profile, lit by the faint moonlight. Her eyes were open. Her expression was, I don't have the right word, receptive. Like someone hearing music they'd been waiting their whole life to hear. Like someone recognizing a voice they thought they'd forgotten. Renata, step away from the window. She spoke without turning. Someone's calling me, she whispered. Can't you hear it? They're calling my name. I listened. I heard nothing, just the wind and the silence and the distant creak. There's no one there. Close the window. It sounds like my mother, she said, and her voice cracked on the word mother, and I realized she was crying. It sounds exactly like my mother. She's been dead for 3 years and I can hear her voice and she's saying my name and she needs me. Marcus. She needs me to come outside. I grabbed her arm. I pulled her away from the window. She fought me not violently, but with a desperate, pleading strength. She was trying to go to the window the way a drowning person tries to get to air. Instinctively, necessarily, as though whatever she was hearing was the most important sound in the world, and I was the thing preventing her from reaching it. I got the window closed. I held her while she cried. She kept saying her mother's name. Mom, Mom, I'm here. I'm coming. And I kept my hand over her mouth, as gently as I could, because every time she spoke, the silence outside shifted, leaned in, pressed against the glass. Eventually, she stopped. She went limp in my arms and she stopped, and when she looked at me, the receptive expression was gone, and in its place was confusion. Pure confusion. She didn't remember going to the window. She didn't remember hearing the voice. The last thing she remembered was lying down in bed. What happened? She said. You were sleepwalking, I lied. It's fine. Go back to sleep. She went back to bed. I nailed the cross back over the window. June had a hammer and nails in the kitchen, and I think she kept them there for exactly this purpose, and I went back to my room and I sat on the edge of my bed and I made a decision. We were leaving in the morning. Both of us. No more interviews, no more recordings, no more episodes. We were getting in our cars and driving out of this valley and never coming back. I should have made that decision days earlier. I should have made it the first night when the voice called my name and I lay in bed knowing, not guessing, not suspecting, that something real and vast and hungry was standing in the dark outside, tasting my name on its tongue. But I didn't. And because I didn't, because I waited, because I put the story above the survival, what happened the next day happened. The next morning, Renata was gone. Her bed was made. Her bag was on the floor, untouched. Her shoes were by the door. Her car keys were on the nightstand. The window was open. The cross I'd nailed over it was on the ground again. The nails were still in the wood, but they'd been pulled straight out, as though the cross had been removed with a slow, steady, irresistible force. There were no footprints on the roof, no marks on the wall, no sign of how someone could have left through a second-story window without a ladder or a rope. But there was a trail, like Boyd's, a line through the grass leading from directly below Renata's window to the tree line. Not footprints this time, handprints. 2 sets of handprints, Renata's, small and pressed into the cold earth, and something else's. Larger, deeper, the fingers too long. She had been dragged, or carried, or led by the hand. The search party went out. Elder Pruitt led it again, with Jean and 6 other men. They were gone for 3 hours. They found nothing. The trail ended at the tree line, the same way Boyd's had. The forest had opened and closed. I stood at the edge of the woods and I screamed her name. I screamed it into the trees, into the silence, into the vast and patient dark. I broke every rule. I said her name. I said it again. I said it loud enough to echo off the ridges. Jean pulled me back. He didn't say anything. He just pulled me away from the trees and walked me back to the boarding house. And I sat in the kitchen and I put my head in my hands and I tried to understand what I had done. Renata was gone. Renata who had come because of me. Because I had called her. Because I had told her about the story. Because I had dangled the possibility of a podcast episode in front of her, and she had done what she always did. She had come. And now, she was gone. And it was my fault. Not just because I'd brought her here. Because I'd screamed her name at the tree line. I'd said it loud and clear, in the open air, in the valley where everything spoken is heard. I'd given the listener her name like a gift, like an offering. Elder Pruitt came to the boarding house that afternoon. He sat across from me at the kitchen table. He looked older than he had a week ago. The lines in his face were deeper, the skin around his eyes more papery. Maintaining the boundary was physical work, and the boundary was under strain. 2 in 10 days, he said. That hasn't happened since 1987. This is my fault. He didn't disagree. He didn't agree either. He just looked at me with those sharp, dark eyes and said, "The listener doesn't take people because outsiders visit. It takes people because the rules break down. The rules broke down because you're here, yes. But Boyd broke his own rule. Your friend was vulnerable. The listener finds vulnerable people. People who are grieving, people who are missing someone. It offers them the voice they most want to hear. Her mother died 3 years ago," I said. "She never dealt with it." He nodded. "That's what it looks for. The cracks, the open doors." He paused. "You need to leave, Mr. Elliot. Today, before the bell." "I can't leave without knowing what happened to her." "You won't know. That's the point. That's the whole point of everything we do here. We don't know. We've never known. We've just survived." "How? How have you survived for 170 years living next to something like this?" "By following the rules. By not asking questions we can't answer. By not poking at the membrane." He looked at me hard. "You're a smart man. You study stories. But you made the mistake that smart people always make. You thought understanding something would give you power over it. It doesn't. Understanding the listener doesn't help you. The listener doesn't care if you understand it. It's not a puzzle. It's not a mystery waiting to be solved. It's a condition, like weather, like gravity. You don't solve gravity. You live with it." I knew he was right. On every level, I knew he was right. But there was something else inside me now. Not curiosity. Not professional ambition. Guilt. Guilt for Renata. Guilt for Boyd, whose investigation I'd accelerated by drawing attention. Guilt for the town itself, for disrupting the equilibrium they'd maintained for generations. And underneath the guilt, a terrible, gnawing suspicion that I wasn't done causing damage, that my presence here had set something in motion that wouldn't stop just because I left. "The listener," I said. "It's more active now. June said it's doing things it doesn't usually do." The breathing sound, the footprint at the tree line. Is it coming closer to the town?" Elder Pruitt was silent for a long time. Outside, the afternoon was dimming. Clouds had moved in, thick and low, and the light in the kitchen was gray and flat. "The boundary holds," he said carefully, "as long as the markers are maintained. as long as the crosses stand, as long as the bell rings and the people follow the rules, it holds. But boundaries are like walls. They're only as strong as the attention you pay them. And lately, he stopped, started again. There have been disturbances, small things. A marker stone found moved, not destroyed, moved. 2 inches to the left. A cross on a tree found inverted. Salt lines broken by something that didn't leave tracks. It's testing the boundary. It's always testing the boundary. That's what it does. It pushes and pushes and tests, and as long as we push back, it holds. But when something disrupts the routine, when the town's attention is divided, when people are scared, when the rules are broken openly, loudly, repeatedly, the pushing gets harder, the testing gets more aggressive. He stood up. He looked exhausted. "Leave today," he said again. "Take your recordings and your notes and go. Write whatever you want. Tell whatever story you want, but leave. And if the listener follows me, you said distance doesn't matter once it knows your name." He paused at the door. Distance matters some. It weakens with distance. Here, in the valley, it's strong. Out there, he gestured vaguely at the world beyond the ridges. Out there it's an echo, a whisper. Something you hear at night and tell yourself is the wind. He looked at me. It'll never be nothing. Not for you. Not now. But it'll be survivable. He left. I packed my bag. I loaded my car. I was going to leave. I was actually going to leave. And then the bell rang. It was 4:30 in the afternoon. Sunset was still an hour away. The bell should not have been ringing. I stood in the parking lot next to my car, my keys in my hand, and I counted the tolls. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I held my breath. 8. The 8th toll was different. It was lower, deeper. It vibrated in my chest and in the ground under my feet and in the fillings of my teeth. It was not a sound a church bell should make. It was the sound of something being struck that was far larger than a bell. And then the town moved. Not gradually, not casually, instantly. Doors slammed, shutters closed. I heard locks engaging up and down the street, a cascade of metal on metal. In the windows that I could still see, faces appeared briefly and then vanished as curtains were yanked shut. Within 30 seconds, the main street was empty, except for me, standing next to my car, in the open, with my keys in my hand and my door unlocked and my bag on the back seat and the engine not running. June's door opened. She was in the doorway, waving at me frantically. "Inside, now, right now!" I ran. I left my car, left my bag, left everything. I ran to the boarding house and June pulled me through the door and slammed it shut and through every lock, the deadbolt, the chain, the sliding bolt. 2 more that I hadn't noticed before. And then she went to every window on the ground floor and checked them. One by one, making sure they were locked, making sure the crosses were in place. "What happens now?" I said. "We wait," she said. "We wait until morning, no matter what we hear." "What are we going to hear?" She didn't answer. She went to the kitchen and came back with a bag of salt, coarse rock salt, the kind you use for curing meat or de-icing steps, and she poured a line of it across every door threshold and windowsill. Her movements were quick and practiced. She'd done this before. We sat in the kitchen. The lights were off. June said it was better that way, though she didn't explain why. The only light came from a single candle on the table. We sat on opposite sides of it, in the near dark, and we waited. The first hour was silence. The deep, heavy, watchful silence I'd come to know. But this was different. This was thicker, more present. I could feel it pressing against the walls of the house, pushing at the windows, testing the doors. The house creaked and shifted, the way old houses do, but the creaks were rhythmic, regular, as though something was leaning against the building, then pulling back, then leaning again, breathing. In the second hour, the walking started. Footsteps, outside, on the main road, not one set, many, dozens, scores. The sound of feet on gravel and packed earth, moving in unison, a shuffling procession that went from one end of the town to the other, and then turned and came back. Over and over, a parade of invisible walkers circling the town like a current. I looked at June. She was sitting perfectly still, her hands flat on the table, her eyes fixed on the candle flame. Her lips were moving slightly. Praying, I think. "Who is that?" I whispered. "Don't listen," she said. "Don't try to count them. Don't try to identify the footsteps. Just let them pass." But I couldn't not listen. The footsteps were varied. Some heavy, some light, some bare, some booted. Some had the rhythmic confidence of a grown adult. Some were the quick, pattering steps of children. And some were wrong, too fast or too slow, or with too many feet, or with a gait that didn't match anything bipedal. The walking went on for 40 minutes, and then it stopped, all at once, like a radio being switched off. The silence returned, heavier than ever, and then the knocking started. Someone knocked on the front door of the boarding house. 3 sharp raps, spaced evenly, the kind of knock a neighbor would make. A polite knock, an "I need help" knock. June closed her eyes. 3 more knocks, and then a voice, a woman's voice. Old, quavering, familiar. I recognized it. It was the woman from the general store, the one who told me the town had no stories. "June, it's Martha. Open the door. I'm scared. I need to come in." June didn't move. Her lips kept moving. "June, please. I can hear it out here. It's close. Please let me in." The voice was perfect. The cadence, the accent, the specific way she pronounced June's name. Everything was right. If I hadn't been told, if I hadn't known, I would have opened the door. June opened her eyes and looked at me. "Martha is in her house," she said, very quietly. "She's locked in like everyone else." "That is not Martha." The voice outside changed, shifted, became a man's voice. Deep, rough. "June, it's Jean. I'm hurt. I fell trying to get home. My legs broke. Open the door." Then a child's voice, high, reedy, desperate. "Grandma June, I'm scared. Grandma, please." June flinched at that one. Her jaw tightened. Her hands pressed harder against the table. But she didn't move. The voices kept coming, one after another. Every person in town, or so it seemed. Each voice perfect. Each voice pleading, begging, crying, asking to be let in, asking for help, asking by name, and then my name. "Marcus." Renata's voice. Exactly Renata's voice. "Marcus, I'm outside. I got out. I'm okay. Please open the door." The guilt hit me like a physical blow. I stood up. I took a step toward the door. June's hand shot across the table and gripped my wrist. Her fingers were like steel cables. Her eyes were open and locked on mine, and they were terrified and furious and absolutely immovable. "That is not your friend," she said. "Your friend is gone, whatever that is. It is using her voice and her name and your grief to pull you through that door. If you open it, we both die. Sit down." I sat down. I sat down and I listened to Renata's voice call my name for 20 minutes. I listened to her tell me she was cold. I listened to her tell me she was scared. I listened to her say she was hurt. I listened to her cry. And I didn't open the door. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. Harder than anything I can describe. Because the voice wasn't just close, it was right. Every inflection, every breath, every tiny vocal tick that I'd heard in 100 phone calls and 1,000 podcast planning sessions. It was Renata, And it wasn't Renata. And both of those things were true at the same time, and the space between them was a space you could lose your mind in. The voice stopped at 3 in the morning. The silence came back, but it was different now. Lighter, as though something had pulled back, retreated, gone back to wherever it went when the sun came up and the world reasserted itself. At 6:15, the first gray light seeped through the curtains. June stood up, blew out the candle, and began unbolting the locks. "It's over," I said. "For now," she said. "The 8-toll night. It happens. It's happened before. We survive it. We always survive it." "Does anyone ever open the door?" She paused with her hand on the last lock. "Yes," she said. "Sometimes. And they go. And we add their name to the list of names we don't say anymore." I should have left that morning. I was packed. My car was waiting. All I had to do was drive. But when I went outside, I found Cora Whitfield sitting on the steps of the boarding house, the 16-year-old from the general store, the skeptic, the eye-roller, the one who called it all theater and superstition. She was shaking, not from the cold. Her face was white and her eyes were red, and she was holding her phone in both hands, gripping it like it was the only real thing in the world. "It called my dad's name," she said. "My dad's been dead for 4 years. It came to our door and it called his name, and it sounded exactly like him, and my mom almost opened the door." She looked at me. "You study this stuff, you record things and analyze them, and you know about folklore, and what is it? What is it really? Because it's not a story. Stories don't knock on your door at 2 in the morning sounding like your dead father." I sat down next to her. I didn't have an answer. I had theories, academic frameworks for understanding persistent folk beliefs, cognitive models of grief and perception, environmental explanations for acoustic anomalies. I had all the apparatus of rational explanation, and none of it was worth a damn, and we both knew it. "I don't know what it is," I said. "I don't think anyone does." "Then how do we stop it?" "I don't think we do. I think your town has been managing it, containing it, for a very long time, and that's not the same as stopping it, but it's something." She looked at the tree line. The morning sun was hitting the tops of the ridges, but the valley was still in shadow. The trees were still dark. "I want to leave," she said. "I've always wanted to leave. But Elder Pruitt says it knows my name now, that it's always known my name, that it's known the name of every person born in this valley." She paused. "Is that true? Can it really follow you?" I thought about what Pruitt had told me. That distance weakened it, that out there beyond the ridges it would be an echo, a whisper, something you hear at night and tell yourself is the wind. "I think you can leave," I said. "I think it gets weaker with distance, but I don't think it ever goes away completely." She was quiet for a while. Then she said something that has stayed with me every day since. "So the legend isn't just about this town," she said. "It's about everyone who's ever been in this town. We carry it with us, wherever we go." Yes, I thought. That's exactly right. Every small town has its own terrifying legends, and the legends don't stay in the town. They follow you home. What happened next happened fast. I was walking to my car, finally. Actually walking to my car, actually leaving, keys in hand, decision made. Cora had gone home. The town was emerging slowly from the 8-toll night, shell-shocked and quiet. People checking their properties, checking the boundary markers, checking on neighbors. I was at my car when I heard the scream. It came from the south end of town, from the direction of the creek. A woman's scream, not the manufactured, dramatic scream of a movie, but the raw, involuntary sound of a human being encountering something that the mind cannot process. I ran toward it. So did others. Jean, and a man I didn't know, and Elder Pruitt, moving faster than an 81-year-old should be able to move. We found Cora's mother at the creek bank. She was on her knees in the mud, staring at the water. The creek was shallow here, maybe 6 inches deep, running over a bed of smooth stones. And in the creek, arranged on the stones with deliberate precision, were objects. A boot, Boyd Langham's boot. I recognized it from the search. A watch, Renata's watch, a silver Timex with a cracked face that I'd seen on her wrist 100 times. A child's toy, a small wooden horse painted red, worn smooth by years of handling. I didn't recognize it, but the woman on the bank did. She was sobbing, reaching for it, and Jean was holding her back. "That was Danny's," she kept saying. "That was my Danny's. He's been gone since '94. The objects were placed in a line, evenly spaced, like an offering, or a display, or a message. And downstream, about 20 yards away, written in the mud of the bank in letters 6 inches tall, was a word. Not carved, not drawn, pressed into the mud by something that had pushed downward with tremendous force, leaving smooth, deep impressions. More. Elder Pruitt saw it. His face went gray. He turned to Jean and spoke in a low, urgent voice that I wasn't meant to hear but did. "It's never done this before. It's never communicated. What does it want? What it's always wanted. More. More names. More voices. More of us." He looked at me. He stirred it up. The outsider. The questions, the recordings, the attention. He woke up its appetite. Jean looked at me too. Not with anger. With something worse. With the expression of a man looking at a natural disaster, something too big to blame, too destructive to forgive. I backed away. I walked to my car. I got in. I started the engine. I drove. I drove out of Harrow Creek, down the gravel road, through the hollows, onto the state route, onto the highway. I drove for 4 hours without stopping. I drove until the ridges flattened into hills and the hills flattened into the bland commercial sprawl of a mid-sized city. And I pulled into a gas station parking lot, and I sat there with the engine running and the heater on. And I shook. I shook for a long time. That was 5 months ago. I went back to my apartment in Morgantown. I canceled the next 3 months of podcast episodes. I told my remaining listeners that I was taking a break for personal reasons. I didn't tell them why. I didn't tell anyone why. Who would believe me? Renata's family filed a missing persons report. The police investigated. They found her car in Harrow Creek, her belongings in the boarding house, and a town full of people who said she'd gone for a walk in the woods and never came back. The investigation is still open. They won't find her. They'll never find her. I tried to go back to normal. I went to work, I bought groceries, I called my parents, I watched television. I did all the things that normal people do in the normal world, and for a few weeks it almost worked. But then at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night, I heard it. The hum. That low rhythmic subharmonic vibration that the audio engineer had identified on my recording. Not from outside. Not from the woods, there are no woods near my apartment. From everywhere. From the walls, from the floor, from the air itself. A sound that had no source and no direction and no explanation. And then very faintly, from somewhere that was both very far away and very close. Marcus. I live in Morgantown. I'm 200 miles from Harrow Creek. There are no forests pressing against my windows, no valley walls to funnel sound, no boundary markers or crosses or salt lines. There's just a third-floor apartment with thin walls and a parking lot view, and a radiator that clanks at night. But I hear it. Every night. Starting at 9 o'clock, as though the bell still rings somewhere in the architecture of reality, as though the listener's clock runs independently of distance and geography. Starting at 9, lasting until 3. 6 hours of the hum and the voice and the heavy, patient, attentive silence. It's getting louder. Not every night, but over time. Incrementally. The way a tide rises, you don't notice it happening, but one day you realize the water is higher than it used to be. And I'm hearing other things now. Not just my name. Other names. Names I recognize. Jean, June, Cora. Names I don't recognize. Older names. Names from the collection. Names the listener has been gathering for 170 years. It's playing them for me. All of them. A library of the taken, cataloged in sound, recited by something that doesn't sleep and doesn't forget and doesn't stop. Last week I heard Renata's voice, not calling my name, speaking, having a conversation with someone I couldn't hear. Laughing. She sounded happy. She sounded like she was somewhere warm and safe and far away from here, and I wanted so badly to answer, to say something back, to ask her where she was and if she was okay and if she could ever forgive me. I didn't answer. I lay in bed and I pressed my hands over my ears and I waited for 3 o'clock. But here's what I can't stop thinking about. Here's the thing that keeps me awake even after the sound stops, even in the quiet hours between 3 and dawn when the world feels almost normal again. Elder Pruitt said the listener's influence weakens with distance. He said that out here beyond the valley it would be an echo, a whisper. It's not a whisper anymore. I don't know what that means. I don't know if it means the listener is getting stronger, or if it means it's getting closer, or if it means the distance is somehow shrinking, if the valley is expanding outward, inch by inch, night by night, swallowing the distance between Harrow Creek and the rest of the world. I don't know, but I hear it. Every night, louder than the night before. And last Tuesday I found something outside my apartment door, on the mat, placed with deliberate precision, the way the objects had been placed in the creek. A stone, small, flat, limestone, on its face chiseled with a precision that no human tool could achieve. A symbol I recognized. A circle with a vertical line through it, bisected by 2 horizontal lines. A boundary marker from the perimeter in the woods. It shouldn't be here. It's 200 miles from where it should be. But it's here, and there's mud on it. Creek, mud. And when I held it up to my ear, I know, but I had to. When I held it up to my ear, I could hear water, running water, the sound of a creek, flowing over smooth stones, very far away and getting closer. I don't sleep anymore. I sit in my apartment, and I watch the door, and I wait for 9 o'clock. And when the hum starts, I count the minutes until 3. I count because counting is a system, and systems are what keep you alive. I know I need to go back. I know that the answer, if there is an answer, if answers even apply to something like this, is in Harrow Creek, in the woods, in the boundary, in whatever Elder Pruitt has spent his life maintaining, and whatever the founders discovered in 1847, and whatever lies at the center of all those converging trees, in the deep silence, in the space where directions lie, and sounds lie, and time lies. I need to go back, and I'm afraid that going back is exactly what it wants. Cora was right. The legend doesn't stay in the town. It follows you home. It follows you everywhere, because the legend isn't a story about a place. It's a story about a relationship between the thing that listens and the people who are heard. And once you've been heard, once your name is in the collection, once the listener knows the shape of your voice and the weight of your grief and the exact frequency of your fear, the relationship doesn't end. It just gets quieter for a while. Every small town has its own terrifying legends. I used to study them. I used to think they were cultural artifacts, remnants of old fears, metaphors for real danger, stories that communities told to bind themselves together. I was wrong. Some legends are instructions. Some legends are warnings. Some legends are the only thing standing between a town and the darkness at its edge. And some legends are patient. They wait. They listen. They learn your name. And then, one night, when the distance between you and the place you thought you'd left behind has shrunk to nothing, when the hum fills your apartment and the silence presses against your windows and the voice of someone you love calls to you from just outside the door. They knock 3 times, slow and even, the kind of knock a neighbor would make, polite, familiar. I hear it now, right now, as I'm finishing this. 3 knocks on my apartment door. I'm not going to answer it. I'm not going to answer it. I'm not going to answer it. But here's the thing I can't stop thinking about. The thing that wakes me up at 3 in the morning soaked in sweat. The thing I'm telling you because someone needs to know. Every night I say I'm not going to answer it. And every night the knocking gets a little louder. And every night the voice sounds a little more like someone I love. And every night my hand gets a little closer to the lock.